I have this tilted at an angle a little bit, so I really want to get to the base of that occipital lobe. It's actually called the occiput. That is my goal, my PBM laser goal, and we'll see how it goes. Today is May 31st, 2026. I've been using my WeberBrain Pro photobiomodulation helmet for 2 months now. At this early stage, I have already noticed some improvement in memory and concentration. As I've said before, it is possible that is a placebo effect, or could be I'm just drinking more coffee, but as far as I can tell, it does seem like the helmet has improved my memory and concentration. As a result of that, it has somewhat lifted my typical depressive state. My mood tends to feel better. I would not say I am free of depression. Often wake up worrying what's going on in the world and my life, but having better concentration and memory, being able to think more clearly, does help my mood. I have noticed a similar effect when I take modafinil, which I've taken for studying or times when I need to concentrate. I don't really take that too often anymore, but that also comes with mood enhancement in addition to the ability to concentrate. One thing about the modafinil is I often have a sense of a crash where I'll feel depressed and like a come down when the effects of that medicine are over. However, with this laser helmet, there's no crash or come down. It's a steady state of having more alertness and some improved cognitive performance. However, my main goal remains trying to treat my visual field loss, and this episode I mostly want to talk about my Homonymous Hemianopia and also the software I have designed to try to rehabilitate that. It's a condition I first developed at age 14 when my occipital, parietal, and temporal lobe was damaged, particularly the right occipital lobe, and there's two optic tracts. And if you see an MRI or a CT scan, you can see the slightly lighter area. And if that's severed or damaged, then you are going to lose half your vision. Now, there is an optic chiasm, and because it was damaged on the right, crosses over, I cannot see on the left. If my left was damaged, I would not be able to see on the right side. Most people, when they first get this condition, they don't even notice. And that is because just like I can't see behind my head, like it's not black back here. I can't see. I don't expect to be able to see behind my head. And similarly, I cannot see this left area, and it's not like this big shadow or darkness. It's simply not there. And what happens is something called neglect. And because you can't see it and you don't know it's there and you're not used to it, you'll crash into things. All of a sudden you have this narrow field of view and your brain quickly adapts to that. And it's like, okay, I can only see 90 degrees of vision or whatever variation you may have on your homonymous hemianopia. So that happened to me, and I would not eat the food on the left side of my plate, crash into doors that were like right here, very close to me, crash into people. I have had this condition for 37 years now, and I've gotten very good at looking askance, like at an angle, and sometimes people think I'm looking at them and I'm not. I'm just trying to extend my field of view. Neglect is the first thing that happens, and then people want to know how to treat it. Now, most doctors, medical professionals, they'll tell you it cannot be cured. You're not going to be able to restore that vision. Some may naturally come back as you heal. Some people get lucky. Very few people, they may get all their vision back if the brain was damaged and it healed. But for me, I was shot in the head. It destroyed that part of my brain. So the likelihood of it just spontaneously coming back is basically zero. And a lot of people, that is the unfortunate reality you'll have to face. I'm not saying everyone has that. There are some people, it will come back. A certain degree of it may come back, and that's great if it does. However, they typically focus on avoiding the neglect and learning what's called a saccade, where you turn your eyes and you're just moving your eyes around, and you learn that you're missing vision here. You're always cognizant of it. And I've gotten very, very good at that. When I'm walking, I'm almost always thinking, okay, I need to look all the way to my left. However, even now, after 37 years, I do forget sometimes. I'll crash into someone, or a car is coming out of a driveway, and I had some close calls. It's nerve-wracking, and it can be depressing. It can be upsetting. It makes it slower to read. Some people can drive, some can't. Combination of the laws in your state where you live, or wherever in the world you may live, if you're comfortable driving. I would say, though, as far as driving in the modern age, now that they have full self-driving cars, which are not yet perfect, but probably better, the average person with homonymous hemianopia, probably better to have that type of vehicle where it's making some of these visual decisions for you. But I've never been satisfied that I just have to accept that this vision is missing. I am realistic about it. I don't have wishful thinking or looking for some type of miracle cure, but it seems worth at least trying. There are a couple players in the visual restoration therapy, VRT field. One of the big ones is NovaVision. I tried NovaVision about 20 years ago, and there was a doctor helping me, and he said he thought he was seeing my visual field start to expand, and I thought maybe I was, but then I realized for me, it was not expanding. I was, maybe, I don't know if it's subconscious, but I was kind of getting better at looking off to my side. So there's these dots flashing, and I just would kind of look at an angle, or not intentionally at all. Just, I'm so used to moving my eyes. You would test a couple times, and sometimes it could be a couple degrees different. And that was, I would say, mistaken for my visual field improving. So one of the problems with visual restoration therapy is people either cheating intentionally or most often unintentionally. Is you don't even realize it. It takes a split second. You move your eyes. It's very hard to just look forward, especially when it's kind of a contradictory thing, because on one hand, you are being told that you need to compensate for this neglect, but during these tests, you need to look absolutely straight. What can you see in the border range of your lost vision or not? And the way these visual restoration therapies work is, let's say I have 90 degrees of vision. And so they're not trying to recover this vision that's far out. The test first tries to determine what they call the transition zone. So the way the visual restoration therapy typically works is right along the border of where you can't see, the scotoma, and where you can see is called the transition zone. And what they try to do is flash lights right on and outside of that, and try to encourage, through interaction with the computer and the flashing lights, to expand the vision. And the interaction part is key, because right now there is light here, and if just passive light or the sun or things moving was going to restore my vision, that would have already happened. So the theory behind the visual restoration theory is that you're interacting with this light, you're cognizant of the fact there's light there, and you're focusing on that. I once heard the term energy flows where attention goes, and I think that has a neural background too, a neurological background. So that's really the premise of neuroplasticity, that through concentration and focus, you may be able to train the brain to take on lost function. Like I said, I tried this. I might have seen a little bit of expansion, but I would say a 2 or 3 degrees is just in the margin of error, and I wouldn't really get too excited about that. Now, if you could expand it 5 or 10 or more, then I think something's really happening, and that's my goal. Is really, I'd love to just expand it all, but even just to expand it some, to push that transition zone out, that is my goal. And I have a two-pronged approach, and I've discussed this in the other videos. The first is my helmet. I'll just say mitochondrial enrichment. I'm getting this laser light energy, and through enzymatic reactions and catalysts, it is stimulating blood flow and oxygen, and neurons that are damaged but not dead may become revived. And also training the brain to take on other functions. What was once used for, I don't know, memory, maybe a little piece of the brain can also take on visual function. The brain is still a very mysterious thing, and we're not entirely sure how it works. So that is also part of the premise behind neuroplasticity. And the more oxygen, the more mitochondria and ATP and energy that your brain has, the better chance it has of recovering. Now, that alone, without any VRT, could restore vision and other function. However, my theory is using the helmet and this window of time called metabolic priming afterwards, where the brain is in a heightened state of alertness, doing the VRT training exactly at that time gives the best possible chance of expanding this vision. And I think that's where other VRT therapies in the past may have failed. Now, my other grievance with VRT is it's just these static dots, and I think there's a couple different types, some with kinetic, which would mean rather than just dots flashing, there's lines and shape moving. But even that, I think, just has problems. So I've spent more than half my life thinking about this, and now that I have the ability to do some programming with the help of AI, I have put those thoughts into software. And in just a moment, I'm going to show you some of the innovations I've made. It's unproven. I don't know if it will help or not. It might just be a bunch of nothing. And I'm not a person who try to deceive myself or anyone else. I mean, either my vision will expand or not. I think some people, it's depressing and they'll convince themselves that they have some of it has come back when it hasn't. It's easy to delude yourself, and I'm way past that. So either this will work or it won't. And if it does work, I'd be happy to put it online for free and let other people use it. Right now, it's not proven, so I don't want to do that yet. And another innovation I've made is I've started working with different frequencies. Now, there's frequencies in sound and light, and you could try to combine these listening to what they call binaural beats, where there's like 200 hertz and then 240, and then that difference is like a 40 hertz difference. I'm using that frequency in light and sound. So I have recently added this frequency, this flashing, to the lights also. So I have this sound, 40 hertz, 10 hertz, whatever you may want to use, in conjunction with this VRT therapy. Now, one risk, there are certain flashing frequencies that can cause seizure. And if you've had brain damage, you are more at risk for a seizure. It's pretty much known frequencies that are likely to cause this. You may have remembered there was once this Pikachu cartoon, and I think the eyes were flashing and a bunch of kids had a seizure. So there are dangerous frequencies, and I have intentionally avoided those. However, because the shape is small and in the blind area, I think the risk is very, very small, but nevertheless, that could be a risk, and that's another reason I don't yet want to present it to the public. However, I think basically I just want to stimulate this blind area and this transition zone any way possible. Basically throwing everything I've got at it. And when I do this helmet, and then afterwards I do this VRT for an hour. But then even at really any other time I have free time, it's almost like a video game. I try to slip in more of this VRT training. I'm really just devoting as much as my time as I can. There's also something called prism glasses, Fresnel prism, and they'll literally put these prisms, whatever side your blindness is on, and it bends the light. And then so it's a little bit like Alice in Wonderland, but using your foveal vision, the macula, you can basically bend some of the light in your periphery and see it in front of you. It's almost like a house of mirrors. I did try that a long time ago, and it was confusing for me. I really probably should have tried it again, but I just haven't for many years. Yeah, there really just isn't any technique that can be relied on to restore vision, to not just get better to train yourself to adapt to your lost sight, which you should do if you have this problem. But wouldn't it be great to get the vision back? And that's what I'm working on. It's unknown, but I've got time and resources to do it. Okay, so the rest of the video, I'm going to show you the software and the enhancements I've made, and then over time I'm just going to keep developing it, and then whether or not it works, I can release it. Maybe it will help someone else, but obviously if it does work for me, I would love to be able to release it to others and other people to get the same benefit. And also in a couple days, I'm going to be going to America. I'm going to be buying some more laser devices, intranasal, and just a couple other things that I'd like to bring back from America, and that will enhance my protocol even more. I have also heard the methylene blue can enhance cognition and neuroplasticity, so I might throw in some pharmaceutical components as well, so it'll be a multi-pronged approach. So as you can see, I've been working with Claude, and this is just some of the most recent work I've been doing. I'm not a programmer. I have worked with software in the past, but I'm dependent on Claude to go through the different iterations and discuss what I want to do. And then it'll give me different iterations of the test. I'll download it, I'll test it, and then just keep going. You can see I've been working on this for a while now. Let's switch over to the actual application. So here's the visual field test itself. There's a lot of different elements to it. In the interest of time, I won't go very deep into every single detail, but I'll try to give you a somewhat detailed overview. So here I'm on version 5.52, and you can save the sessions and reload them. You can look at what you've done. You can compare them to other sessions. We'll get to that in a minute. So at the top here, there's 3 different modes. There's test, and if I ran this is similar to the Humphrey field analyzer. There's no bells and whistles. It's just different green dots that flash, and I will do a very small demo of that. And this is more training mode. You can see there's dots, and unlike the Humphrey field analyzer mode, the dots can expand and flash. And this is not so much to determine where my vision loss is and isn't, even though this can be used for that. This is more to expand the vision. And then there's this kinetic mode that involves shapes that move and have different designs and move in different ways. Okay, here we have the left and right field. I'm missing my vision in the left field, so I typically check the left box. There is a mode where actually it makes sense for me to check the right and not the left, and that's where I sweeping the visual field from the right to the left. I'll explain why I'm doing that in a minute. So one thing that's important is horizontal zone. So it doesn't really make sense to just try to train the whole area. It can make sense to test 180 degrees of your visual field, but typically you want to focus on what's called the transition zone, that area where you can see and where you can't see. And that can be fine-tuned with this slider here. One thing I didn't really realize until I built this test, and I recently got an official Humphrey Field Analyzer test done, is that there's actually some variance along the vertical plane, some areas where I can see significantly more than others. So sometimes it makes less sense to train the very top or the very bottom, or to focus more on the middle, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So that also can be adjusted. You can really just skip down here, and there's a preview zone. And this is the 0 line, and this is the top and the bottom. So this is the total available. So I have focused on this narrow band, but some people may want to focus on different areas. Let's just really quickly go much more here and make this a little smaller. Go back to that preview. And you can see the area has changed. Now there's less of the top and the bottom, but more of the left to right. So again, there's horizontal and vertical. So it can be helpful sometimes not to have the dot be too bright. If it's very bright, it might make it hard to see where other things are happening. So it can be helpful to adjust the dot contrast. This hit flash size, and this is something that does not apply to this test mode, but I like the dot to expand, because sometimes I'm not really sure, like I'm testing where it's like right on the edge and I might see it, I might not. So this I can control when I actually hit the space bar, which triggers a hit. I can adjust how big the dot will get, and that'll make more sense in a minute. Here you can see there's a fixation cross. It's helpful to be able to have a central point to focus on. And sometimes I even like to have this line too to really help me focus right here, right in the middle. So it's very typical that my eyes will drift, and this helps me literally stay centered. Sometimes I experiment with a sound to indicate there's a dot. This can lead to false positives because I'll hear a sound and the dot will flash, and then I won't really see it, but I'll be like a Pavlovian effect where I'll just click it. But it still can be useful. So all this stimulus shape, this applies to the kinetic mode. And get into this in a minute. This gabor is like there's kind of like a barbershop pole of like diagonal lines. This flicker stimulus is a newer thing that I've added. And this can carry some seizure risk, something I mentioned earlier in the other part of the video. But I think because it's so small and these particular frequencies, that's not likely. So you can have no flicker. You can have, this would be a more rapid flicker and then a less rapid flicker. Happen to be alpha and gamma waves. The reason these are not even numbers of just 10 or 40 is this is trying to accommodate my monitor setting. My monitor actually has its own refresh rate. The AI suggested that I don't make this exactly 10 and 40, but with the combination of my monitor flicker rate, it ends up being 40 and 10 even. So this mirror stimulus, this is, I will actually have it on the left and the right. And this, I got this idea actually from watching an episode of House MD when he was helping someone with phantom limb syndrome, and they were missing the left hand, and he put up a mirror, and that helped them get rid of pain they were having. I'll show you that clip.
Phantom pain, your missing arm, 5 different kinds of painkiller in your medicine cabinet. That's what this magic box of neurological trickery is for. It'd be a lot easier to do what the crazy guy who tied you up says. Put your hand in there. Put your hand in there. Now look. Mirror magic. Your arm is back. Now clench both your fists at the same time. Clench. Real hard. Ready? Now let go.
Oh my God. Relaxed. For 36 years I've been in pain, and it's finally gone. Oh my God.
So as you can see, that works for that gentleman, and and my thinking is that something in my brain might trigger. I'm seeing this on the right, and it might say, "Hey, there's also supposed to be something on the left." If I'm just seeing a dot in isolation, and I don't even see the dot, so it's kind of like a tree falls in the wood. Does anybody really hear it? So this, if I can't see it, and I'll show you this mode in a minute, there'll be something flashing here, and that reminds me that there's something happening over on the left. When it comes again to this kinetic mode, which always involves shapes, it can be in a sequence where it'll be perfectly symmetrical. It'll be the top 10, the bottom 10, the top 20, the bottom 20, or it can come at random times. And that can be helpful because sometimes I'll start to anticipate where a shape or a dot's going to appear, and it can lend to accidental cheating and moving my eyes. But when it's random, I don't know where it's going to be. This sweep mode is kind of complicated. It's something I came up with recently. I call it fishhook. I'll explain that right now. So we'll start over from the right, and it's somewhat the same concept as the phantom limb. So instead of a shape appearing in isolation on the left, it starts on the right, and then it disappears into the blind zone. Again, that's called the scotoma. And my thinking is the brain loves to fill in a gap, but if it doesn't even know there's a gap, it's not going to fill it in. So in that mode, I have a start on the right, cross over this central point, and move into the left. And then by hitting the shift key, I can move it back into my field of view. And another thing I can do with that shift key technique, which works in other modes as well, is I can do what I call tickling the transition zone. And so I can move it in and out exactly where I can see and I can't see. And I'm just trying to activate and give that zone more stimulation than might happen with just your traditional dots flashing. So all these apply to the kinetic zone. So this can determine how long the bar is. It can be helpful to have a longer bar or a shorter bar, testing different methods. And another thing, I'll get to that in a minute, this also applies to the wavelength when I use this sine wave. Okay, and then the thickness, that can be changed as well, how thick it is. So you can see here, if I adjust this line's thickness, right here it says 22 trials, and right now it's at its thinnest point. And it says the lines that fit in a vertical zone. So the thinner it is, the more that's going to fit. And if I made it the thickest, only 2 can fit. So it just dynamically figures out how many it can fit on the screen, and that is all dynamic. And I find that helpful to just work with different thickness, different lengths. So as I was mentioning, here this undulating sine wave, and then again, this determines the length of the wave, the wavelength, and then the amplitude, that's the up and down. So it can get interesting to make it different shapes. So one thing about this, when you start messing with a sine wave, you're really not accurately testing the vertical zone anymore, because it's going to traverse more than 1 degree of the vertical zone. So this is measured in a different way, but I find this useful of just a broader, more sweeping way to test the field of view. And this, sometimes I like when I click the space bar that it'll either have a line expanding the whole screen or a line going through all the way up and all the way down when I click shift. Here I can load, let's just do that real quick. I can load an old session. This is the results that I had in the past. And also here, there's a comparison mode. And since we're already down here, let's just try this real quick. So you can see here, this is comparing different sessions. One problem with this is because there are so many parameters, sometimes this can somewhat give you an inaccurate view, but still you can see, and it has all the different stats here. So if you actually are making any progress, and you can highlight or unhighlight the different bars. Okay, let's do a quick trial of some different functions. So at first, it can be a little confusing how this is working, especially since it can be inverted if you're looking at the left or the right. But I typically like to check all all the way out to maybe up to 20 degrees to my left. I know I can't see that far, and I know I have what's called macular sparing, or right near my nose. I can see a little bit, so I don't really need to test that. Okay, so let's do this test mode. Start test. Now I'm cheating right now. I'm looking, but you can see there's these dots here now. If I click, no matter what I do, the dot is not going to change. This is just this purpose of this is to test what I can and cannot see. I'm just clicking here. You can also pause, hit return, and then I wanted to keep this here. I made this crosshair because sometimes I was curious, why can't I see that dot? Where is it? And so when I pause it, the dot stays here. The point is not to quickly click space and pretend that I saw it. It's to see where I'm seeing or not seeing. It's taking a moment to examine that. So this was a very quick test. So the green is where I saw it. The red is where I missed it. And you see here I have this thing called ghost click. And so sometimes I'm very strict. Only if I can like see the whole dot or shape, that's the only time I'll click it. And sometimes I'm really trying to push the boundaries. And even if I see a shimmer or a little bit, I'll click. And this ghost click is not perfect, but it tells me, no, you were just imagining that or seeing a reflection on the screen. Go into this dot mode. Again, we're testing here. And at first, this will look similar. So I forgot to mention here, this is the amount of dots. This is only applicable to the dots, not the kinetic shapes. So how many dots you want to see, 10 or 100, whatever. Let's just do a really quick one. So you can see here this expansion. This is what I was talking about before. And if you don't see it, it goes away or it stays. So sometimes I just like to see that, and that's customizable. Let's go back here. I forgot to mention some other things here. So the flash interval is basically how long between each flash. If it's just flashing really quick, then there's not really even time to register. And this is how long does the dot persist. And so the moment you see it and you click the space bar, it will disappear, but it will give you up to 1.6 seconds, 1600 milliseconds to actually see the dot. So that's this dot mode. So there is some chance to have some variability within the dots. It's less pronounced when you're in this dot mode. Let's just look. So there I've chosen squares. Now let's go. Kinetic is where most of my innovations have occurred. Okay, so again, left. So with a kinetic mode, I actually like to go beyond what I can see, and that will make sense in a second. Warning, some things I'm about to show you, for photosensitive viewers, you may not want to watch this or just exercise some caution. Right now, the stimulus is not on yet, but when I turn it on, you'll see what I mean. All right, so let's just do this circle. You can see here this shape is coming. Oops. So I can click shift if I want to take like a second chance, because again, the point here is not quite testing. It's more just training and expanding my field of view. So let's just say this area right here is where I can and can't see, and I just want to make it pop in and out, pop in and out. And when I finally see it, hold on a second. The reason that line, I have this check, flash full screen width. Let's just do this real quick. So just so you can see that. So it's up, down. Again, it's just one more time. Flash. But here you can see it making a cross. That's a little bit overwhelming. And that may or may not be useful. I don't use it that often, but one thing I do like sometimes I do like this height. But this tells me, okay, I saw it a couple, and again, I can pause it if I want to use this crosshair. But it can be a quick way to tell me if I'm seeing it as far to the left as I think I am. And what I would typically do is just be staring straight here. And then if I see it and then push it all the way out of my field of view and then let it come in again, or do what I call tickling, where I can see it and I just move it, make it jump in and out over and over. It's a bunch of repetitions. Let's just finish going through these shapes here. It's a square. It looks more pronounced in the kinetic mode. Let's do this Gabor. I never even heard of this until the AI suggested it. It's all right. Now let's try the flicker. Again, be advised for photosensitive viewers. So this is less flickering, but there is still some. You can see here, actually, I don't really like that shape that much. Soft. And so I don't like where that's starting also. I want that to start further out. Even though I'm pushing this to the right because I've selected left, that's going to make it start, see how it started further to the left. And again, so that flickering really can activate. Sometimes if I have it in this flicker mode, I can see further out, deeper into my periphery than I could without it, which is interesting. Okay, so now let's do this final mode. Actually, let's do this one. Again, be warned, this is flickering even more dramatically because it's slower, so the flickering, you can see it more. If it flickers fast enough, you won't even know. It's like your cell phone. It has a refresh rate, but it's so fast you don't even see it. Now let's try this. Actually, let's turn this off for just a moment. It's going to be overwhelming. So you can adjust the amplitude, and again, you use this length if you want to get the length. Just do that here. You can see here, that's really going to trigger if you can see it or not. This wave is always going to be a wave, but if you check some of these other boxes, the wave will change a little. Really, in this mode, circle and square are the same, but you can see this soft mode does offer a slightly different appearance. And we'll do this flickering too, so it'll be a bit longer here. So that's really stimulating your vision, and that also starting to increase the seizure risk. One needs to exercise caution when doing this. But really, just my opinion, just having this contiguous line and really stimulating that blind zone is potentially more effective than just this Humphrey field analyzer dot. And so this would be the typical other VRT. And there is a lot of thinking going into this. The dot size, how long it appears, the contrast of it. I'm not saying it can't do anything. It certainly is effective. But I'm looking to go beyond this because I did try this type of test before, and it unfortunately just really didn't help me that much. Okay, now I'm going to do a full test. Let me actually, just in case there's photos, I turned off that flickering. I'm going to do a full test with this sine wave. And because of the thickness of it, it's going to be 14. I want you to see this final confirmation screen for this. So as it gets higher and lower, I can see it further out. And as I said, that's something I didn't even realize I could do until I actually started taking this test. It's a little hard to talk and do this test. It's going to be imperfect. So this particular test, I designed this purposely like this because typically it'll be nested in these rows, but because you are traversing and spanning more than one row, I have it look a little different. Now let's just do one last thing. Turn off this wave. Okay, let's just do one more. This is without the wave. It's just going to be the shape. Closer to the center, it's harder for me to see. As the further it gets from the center, the further out I can see. And again, I want to just show you that I just have it go in and out of my vision to just tickle and train and stimulate that blind zone. So I did that very quickly, but you'll tend to see something like a bell curve where I can see further out here and less further here, more narrow. So you can see here, if I put the crosshair, it's saying I barely have any peripheral vision here, right near the center point. But then as you go further out, I have much more. And again, if I did this perfectly, I was paying closer attention, this would look more like a little pyramid. And that's something like I said, I didn't realize until I started doing this test. So what I could do, I could adjust the vertical zone. I could say, okay, I know I can see farther out here. Let's just focus more central macula area. So here you can see I'm showing the full horizontal range that's here, but I just want to focus on a more narrow central area. So I'd go there, I could preview it. And then the dots, shapes, whatever I do is only going to appear here. All right, let's do one last thing quickly. I'll try not to take too much more time. this sweeping. So this is a little confusing. I'm not going to explain this in too much detail, but even though I'm blind on the left, I would choose the right. And I'm going to adjust the parameters a little differently because this is everything basically inverted. Okay, so I've adjusted these a little differently, and maybe in another episode I'll explain that. But again, it's going to start from the right. Just start this here. So all the same shapes and everything can go there. So you saw it started from the right. I'm just going to let that pass. You see it bounce, actually. I have that it bounces within that range, and I can click this shift. Let's just hit spacebar. Again, start from the right. I should also mention, if you make the vertical zone more narrow, that also results in less shapes or less kinetic objects. It's dynamically calculating how much can fit on the screen. Test, so it starts to the right. And then as soon as I can't see it, I click shift. And that sweeps, or I call it fish hook, where I bait the fish and I pull it up. It's just visual mnemonic to help me think about it. And here I can just traverse and tickle and work within this transition zone. And then finally I decide, okay, it's enough of stimulating. When do I see it? And I could make that smaller too. That flash is a little absurd there. So let's just make it much smaller. It starts to the right. Let it go into the blind zone. Pull it back. Get smaller. So the point of this, again, is to not be working with the dots within isolation. I'm training the brain. It's kind of like the phantom limb thing again, and I'll actually show you the mirror function in just a moment. But I know I can see here, and then it will disappear. And the goal is that my brain realizes, okay, I saw something moving. I know it moved into this blind zone, and then I pull it back from the blind zone back into the sighted area, and then try to get the brain to fill in the gap. Let's do one last thing. Let's do this mirror zone. And this can work with the dots or the kinetic. It does not work with the test. Let's go back to this left. So here you can see it's happening on both sides. So I would be staring here, and then this is just like a little extra cue that something is happening on the left. So yeah, so that right is just helping like a phantom limb. Again, you don't want to be focusing too much in every test way out where you can't see. You want to focus as much as you can on the transition zone, with the exception of these kinetic tests where it's moving in and out of the blind zone. Okay, so let's start that. So what I typically do is I just hit the space every time, whether or not I can see it or not. And my thinking is that I'm just training the brain that through this cue on the right, that there's also something on the left. Sometimes I can see it, sometimes I can't. And I only do that in the mirror mode. I could do it. I could also just force myself only to see the left. It's a versatile test. I'm still figuring out how it's best used, but that is my thinking of just going beyond the dots in isolation, higher level of stimulation, leveraging the brain's desire to fill in the gaps. So I think that's enough for now. I know this is overwhelming. It takes some time to be able to adjust these parameters, but I've tried to have different preview modes to help you know what you're going to get. And of course, you can just take the test as many times as you want to see what the different parameters, what permutations are creating when it actually comes to the test. So maybe in a future session, if there's interest, I'll explain this in more detail. And I am still developing this, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of where I'm thinking, where I'm trying to push the envelope and take the peripheral vision testing in an area that I just haven't really seen it. There are some other tests in the past that did use kinetic testing and maybe flickering, but I just haven't seen it all used in one place. So I think this may be one of the first tests that has such a different comprehensive way to approach the problem, and who knows, hopefully it will help. And of course, I have my helmet in the background helping me too. I like to do this right after I use a helmet, but I also just, if I have a little extra time, I'll slip in a couple sessions, because unlike the helmet usage, this does not have a problem of biphasic dosage, or what they call hormesis, and that's when you overstimulate the brain. Now, of course, you need to rest and sleep, but as far as I know, the more stimulation, the better. But when it comes to the laser helmet,
that type of stimulation, there is a limit how much is beneficial before it actually starts to have a negative effect. Okay, that's all for now, and I hope you find this interesting, and I'll keep you updated as it goes.